Hi guys, it's Mike from VizAcademy. Today we're going to talk a little bit about animation that we posted a while ago on our Instagram. That's VizAcademy UK. Okay, I'm going to have to go a little bit lower, and meanwhile, while we're here, just we can enjoy a few nice images created by our students. We just recently started posting work from the ongoing group, so visit our Instagram to see how our group is performing. But without any further ado, this is the video that we're going to learn how to create from pretty much just scratch, or more likely from the model to animation. So as you can see, it already has quite a lot of likes, so you might want to have it in your portfolio as well. Before we really show you how to create this type of animation in 3ds Max, I think it's going to be reasonable to talk just a little bit about the basics of animation itself. So, as you know, 3ds Max is not only for OGBiz, it's pretty much a versatile program that's used for many applications. Gaming and, well, whatever, it's pretty much the perfect solution. But today we're going to talk just a little bit about animation, as I mentioned, but we're only going to be covering the basics of the basics. Why? Because we already did go about it quite a while ago. Okay, I think I'm going to have to move myself a little bit so we can see what I'm working with. And okay, so we're going to need this timeline to really be able to create animation. As you have already seen, I've clicked on Undo key. That pretty much means that whatever changes we're going to make from point 0 on our timeline to any point in on our timeline, it's pretty much going to be point A to point B of our animation. So let's just test it out. I'm going to move this object just a little bit, and now I can move my time slider to pretty much show you the animation and how this object translates from one spot to another. You can create multiple keys for that matter, and we can, for example, make this object shrink a little bit, and then it moves forward just like it was moving already. And then we can also scale it back just a little bit, and we can pretty much create this beautiful animation. Very simple, very fun to do. So let's add just a little bit of rotation, so it's really going to dance for us. Okay, so that's pretty much your 101 with animation. But in order to make this transition or the whole movement a little bit softer, we're also going to be using our default in and out options. So to really control those, we can pretty much hold our left mouse button and pick the option we're interested in. I'm going to go for the easing in for the in and out option, and if you want to exaggerate those, you can also use the curve editor, but it's a little bit different type of work. But right now, all we need to do is create the simple animation we talked about. Okay, so now we can move on to 3ds Max with our building. So let's quickly examine what we're dealing with. So it's a very simple building that everybody can make. And if you want to learn how to create this type of building, please leave a comment on our YouTube channel. So we're going to be able to tell if you're interested in learning how to create this type of buildings really fast. For now, you can use any model from SketchUp, from your Revit folder, whatever you're going to be using, that's going to be okay. Okay, so let's move on and pretty much prepare our scene for the rendering. The first thing I'm going to do, because this scene is already done, is pretty much reset everything. I'm going to delete the sun. We're going to reset the settings for our Corona renderer. Just a quick note, Corona renderer is now in version 8, so there's quite a lot of changes going on. So please visit our YouTube channel. You're basically here, but you can watch the previous video about the newest stuff in Corona if you're interested in this topic. Okay, so pretty much we are almost ready. First thing we're going to be doing is preparing our building. As you can see, I've already managed to group all the objects in order to be able to animate all the elements. So let's ungroup one of the elements. So let's just do it real quick and see what the group is supposed to be consisting of. In my case, it's just roof, it's the walls, and well, the floor or just the lower panel, whatever you would prefer to call it. Let's exit the full screen mode. Now, in order to select everything I'm interested in, I'm just going to select, well, pretty much from the left or front view to make sure that everything I'm interested in is going to be in my group. And voila, we just click on group, we create a group. You can name it top, for example, and we're just going to, well, keep it as is. Okay, now I would like you to also be able to create the same type of animation I have here. So we're going to split all the objects, and you can see that, well, pretty much everything is moving, but the one element that I've just deleted the group for is not. But I think it's going to be more reasonable to just delete all the animations and create it with you. So let's go back to our left or front view. Let's create a line, which is going to be, let's say, our baseline for the bottom. And now let's just make sure to create one. Okay, again, I've got a few of them in here. So let's make sure to delete all of them. All of those lines that we don't need at the moment. So it's pretty much all of them. And now we're just going to scale this a little bit so it's wider. Those lines are going to help you only to decide where those objects are supposed to be placed. So for me, it's going to be a little bit easier if I'm just going to move it somewhere around here. And let's just scale it, move it with our shift selected. And we're just going to create a few copies. 3 copies is going to be enough. And now we're going to do exactly the same thing for the top. And pretty much we're going to move similar distance. So let's just do the same thing and let's create a few copies. It doesn't matter really where you start or what element is going to be moving first, because we're still going to be using Auto key and all the keys are going to be at the same spot. Before we really commit to it, I would also like you to set up the time configuration, which is pretty much the small clock with a gear icon on the bottom right side of your UI. So let's click on it and we're going to see that we've got quite a lot of options. If you want to rescale your time, you can just click on custom, type in how many frames per second you're planning to use. In most of the cases, you should be using something around 30 frames, but 24 is going to be really okay to use. If we want to have more frames to use, we can just rescale our time and, well, add a few frames to our end time. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I really don't need it, but I want you to just remember that this is our option. And now we've got a little bit longer timeline. Okay, so what's our next step? Next, we're going to turn on Auto key. Remember that whenever Auto key is on, you're going to be creating keys for all changes you're doing to your objects if you're going to move your time slider from 0. So you want to make sure that you don't have it on when you don't need it. Okay, first I'm going to select the object on the top and we're going to make sure that our default in and out curve is going to be set, so the animation is going to be slightly softer. Let's look at this animation once again, and pretty much that you can see that it kind of gets a little bit slow at the start, then it's fast in the middle, and it has this nice ease out on the animation. So again, if you want to see it, visit our Instagram. And now let's continue with our animation. Oh, by the way, I think I should turn this off just in case. Okay, now let's move this first object a little bit to the top. So I'm going to make sure that the top is there at the frame 60. Now let's move another part, and as you can see, we already created our first elements of animation. I'm also going to move this part here. The middle part is going to stay, but now let's move the bottom. Okay, pretty much I'm going to just eyeball it because at this stage it's going to have no impact whatsoever on our animation. Okay, but at the same time, you might have noticed that I was very sloppy and I moved my keyframes to 56. So if this happens to you and you want to reposition all of your elements, or let's say animation, we probably should just click on this icon here and click on time and type in 60. So this way, we're going to move this element so the animation is going to really move to frame 60. So what we can do now is select all the elements that we just animated. So let's just make sure to select all of them and type in 60 as well. So this way, it's going to allow us to move all the keyframes. But if 3ds Max does not allow you to well, change everything, so we're going to go to key properties and we can see that there's a lot of objects at the same time to configure. So I'm just going to grab all of those icons and move this on my time slider. So it's easier for me to do it this way because clicking one by one all the objects is going to be a bit of a chore. We could do it on the level of curves, but again, it's going to be a bit more complicated than it really has to. So Auto key, let's turn it off. And now, as you can see, it looks fabulous, but we still don't have the right camera. Just to set it up, I'm going to click on this gizmo on the right side and we already have everything we need. So Shift S to hide all of the shapes that we created. We just don't need them in our viewport. Shift F to make sure that we are using safe frames, and let's zoom in on the object once it's fully in this position where everything is outwards. Okay, I think it's looking great. We can adjust our camera if needed, but I'm just going to go ahead and create Corona camera from the view. I already had one, but I'm just going to stick to the one we created. And look at this. Now let's make this look a little bit prettier by going for clay, and we just created our animation. Okay, but my animation actually goes forward and backwards. So we're going to have to loop this somehow. Because rendering can take a little bit of time, we're going to loop this in another program, because really rendering those frames would be a bit of a waste because there's nothing that's going to be changing. And well, we're going to see about that in a second. Okay, so how do we set up this 3ds Max, or let's say Corona renderer, to allow us to render this object? Because right now we're not going to see anything, and well, that's a little bit of a bummer. Okay, so we're going to click on render setup. Now, once this is done, we're going to also make sure that we have our Corona camera 2 selected, or 1 in your case, because this is my second camera now, and make sure that this padlock is going to be clicked. So whenever you start rendering, it is always going to be rendering this one viewport that we just set up. So it's pretty much this one in my case, so it's quad number 4. And as you can see, it's going to allow us to pretty much keep rendering without any delay or changes. But really, you cannot see anything because we haven't yet added anything to our scene. So first thing, we're going to go for single map. And well, the materials are not yet set up, so we're going to set them up in a second as well. But okay, now we're going to click on this empty slot here. And please make sure to type in Corona Sky. Okay, so Corona Sky is the most basic type of lighting in Corona, which pretty much looks always pretty. Make sure to open tone mapping and type and click on ACOT. We're going to increase the contrast, and maybe, just maybe, we're going to reduce our exposure just a little bit, but not too much, a little bit. Okay, I want to make sure that my direct visibility is going to be on. And in most of the cases, you want to set it to black, so you're not going to have any kind of anti-aliasing on the edges of your object. This is going to be a trick because we're going to be rendering this as PNG. Okay, so what's next? Next, we're going to finally add the second light source, which is Corona Sun. So we're going to jump to Corona, pick Corona Sun, and without really changing anything, we can see that when the sun is a little bit higher, the building is going to be lit a little bit differently. And well, when it's lower, the sun pretty much works as in real life. So we're just going to make sure that it's on a reasonable level, so our building looks really nice. Okay, Still, our geometry needs some kind of map. Okay, you're going to see some maps in here, but we're just going to delete all of them, and we're going to start with a physical material. Now, Corona is actually suggesting that we use Corona physical material because, well, it's physical, it's industry standard, and this is something we go over during our course just because it's amazing. Okay, now this still does not look what we as what we wanted. So I'm going to make sure to assign this object to selection. So all of the building is going to be in one color. It already looks nicer. So I want this to have a little bit more architectural look, a little bit more like a floor plan or a blueprint or something like that. And for that, we're going to be using Corona Wire. Corona Wire is pretty much going to try to trace all the edges of your object. So, well, some preparation for your mesh is going to be required. But in this case, we're just going to move this to base color, and it instantly works. It really works amazingly good. Let's increase the size of our rendering so you can actually see it a little bit better. And well, it seems like my pixels are a little bit small. So we might want to change this from pixel size 0.3 to 0.01. So it's going to have a little bit thicker lines. But in overall, I recommend using the world units because that way you're going to be able to control, or let's say set one fixed size for all of the units. So in case you have to zoom in or increase the size of your rendering, it is always going to follow, and the size of our, let's say, thickness of the line is always going to be the same. Now let's see how it works. So in my case, I believe it looks really nice. So I think we're ready to render this out. Let's just make sure to play this animation just one more time with full screen, Alt and W to quickly jump into full screen mode. And okay, looks perfect. Now we're going to click on Render Setup yet again, go to Common tab, and in here we're going to select some of the important elements. First of all, from single, we're going to jump to range. We made sure that our animation is going to have 60 frames. 60 frames means range from 0 to 60. So it's pretty much 61 frames because 0 is also counted as 1. But regardless, it's really going to work as we intended. Okay, so we set up the range. Now, you can also set the image aspect ratio. So in this case, I chose to work with 0.8, so it's going to look a little bit better on your phones. And now we jump down to render output. Here by default, I've got a JPEG, but I'm going to change this to PNG file. And we pretty much need to create our new building, or let's say new file for this object. So allow me to just jump to my files. In this case, I'm going to go for the animation that I've already created. So let's just go here. So all the frames are already pre-rendered in my case. So again, you can just go ahead and pick PNG if you don't want to have any kind of background, just like I have in here. So we're just going to add 0.1 or just any kind of extra text, because in this case, I already pre-rendered everything, so I'm not going to be going to do this whole process with you. Remember that rendering a frame can take from few seconds to few minutes, so you don't want to go for too high resolution in this case. And what's going to be extremely important is that we set our scene setup. So if you don't want to render forever, and we definitely don't want that, we want to make sure that we work with some kind of limits. When it comes to animation, the best way of making sure that your animation is going to be consistent is setting a number of passes in order to make sure that each frame is going to have the same treatment. So it's going to have the same denoising, the same level of, let's say, noise in general, but also it's going to go through the same amount of passes. So this is pretty much going to require around 15 or 20 to get to the point. Another really good way of setting up your animation is going for noise level limit. This is also going to allow you to predict quite nicely what kind of quality you're going to get. But with images that don't have some kind of background, it might be a bit tricky because the algorithm for the noise calculation also takes your background into consideration. So if we've got a smaller object that's going to be, let's say, considered as less noisy, your render might stop a little bit earlier because the whole background is already denoised or smooth, while your object might not get enough passes at that point. So that's why passes might be the right way to go about it. But regardless, it's a simple animation and that's not going to have that much of an impact. So a direct visibility override, and now we've got our performance tab. Do we change something in here? Most of the time we don't, but for animation we do, and we make sure that our noise pattern is going to be more consistent from frame to frame. This is going to allow you to avoid any kind of, okay, not any kind of, but most of the flickering in your animation, as long as you allow it to render for long enough. Okay, so now all we have to do is click render. Okay, I still need to make sure that my render elements are going to be either deleted, disabled, or just, oh, well, we're not going to be adding them at all. So let's just now render this out and see you in a few seconds once I render this out. Okay, welcome to part 2 of the same video. Now we're going to open our files in Photoshop. Why are we using Photoshop? Because if I paid for the whole Photoshop, I'm going to use the all of it. So we saved our files as PNG files. So now I cannot find them. So let's look for JPEG. Okay, nothing happens. So here we've got PNG and we've got all of our renders. So as you I have noticed, well, the files are looking pretty smooth. So we can just keep on clicking or just hold one of the mouse keyboard buttons, and the animation is going to progress from left to right. And now, okay, it looks fine, but it only goes one way. We're going to fix that. First, we're going to go for image sequence, and we're going to open all of it. As you can see, we already have the frame rate typed in, and well, that's going to be exactly what we need. By default, the timeline in your Photoshop might be off, so go to Window and click on Timeline. A lot of people don't even know that you can create simple animations and, well, quite complex, to be honest, animations in Photoshop. So first thing first, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit and let's play our animation in Photoshop. Here you can see that it kind of looks very smooth. So let's play it again and let's quickly compare it to our Instagram post. It's nice, it's fast, and it looks awesome. So let's just simply go ahead and add some kind of background. If we add a new layer, you're going to notice that this layer is going to be long and big. So first thing first, we need to drag it outside of our video group. So it's going to allow us to place it beneath our object. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and shrink it so it's not going to extend over our main video. Okay, so we need some kind of background. I don't want to experiment with a lot of gradients and unnecessary options. I'm just going to set some kind of color, and in this case I think this sandy color is going to be just fine. Control backspace to fill in the background. Let's adjust it a little bit further, maybe desaturate it slightly, and well, make it slightly brighter. Works fine for me. Okay, and you can see that the whole preview has reset. So let's make sure to re-render it, or let's say re-render it to see if it's playing okay. I like it. So now we're going to go for a file and export it as a video. Okay, but this doesn't really look exactly as our video did, because on our Instagram. Again, let's look at it. It pretty much looks like we already have some kind of reverse in this animation. Okay, we could use some kind of phone app to do it, but that would be a bit of an overkill. So again, we're going to use Photoshop for this. So let's go for Start and select a folder. So in this case, I'm going to create a new one, Animation, and let's just select this as our main folder. So VizAcademy, yada yada, and animation. Now let's render it. It's a very simple object, very simple animation, so it's going to take seconds to really render, and it's done. So unfortunately, if we try to, we cannot reverse our video here. That's why I'm going to go for import video frames to layers. This is just how Photoshop is, well, a little bit funny in this sense. So we're going to go for it. We go from beginning to the end. Okay. And now we're going to pretty much see the same menu, but a little bit differently, because here we can play the animation again, a little bit, let's say, jagged or laggy, but it's the same frame rate and everything works exactly the same. But now I'm going to select all the frames from the beginning to the end. So let's go ahead and do it. Now go to reverse frames right here. And now we just reversed our animation. So it's going to go from, being disassembled to assembly. And we just click on a file, export. And again, we're going to create a video number 2. So end. And we just render it. It's going to save in exactly the same folder because this is the folder. I've set it up now. And finally, this is no longer going to be as, let's say, and it's not as smooth as it would be in different software that's really supposed to be used for, let's say, video editing. But as I said, Photoshop is just as good for it. Duplicate group. We're going to duplicate it to Untitled 3 because this is our video that we started with, and we've got our video. Now I want to enlarge. Actually, I don't even need to enlarge my background just to make sure that it is there. We're just going to go ahead and, add this animation. And finally, we're going to just export it as for the third time, render video, and let's name it Final. Okay, render. This time it's going to take approximately 5 or 4 seconds to render because now it's a huge video production, right? And since we're there, we can pretty much click on our final and looks perfect to me. And as you can see, it's working amazingly smooth. And we can just go ahead and play with it. So if you want to learn more, and if you want to specifically learn how to build this type of buildings, make sure to leave a comment under this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure to also follow us on Instagram for more tips like that. Also, you're going to be able to take part in more voting. So we're going to be able to prepare more content for you. So once again, thank you and see you next time.